Do it. Do you mind? I started the recording. Do you mind? There we go. Well, hello, everybody. It's great to see you, and welcome to our September Mountain West Group Leaders meeting. We're jumping in right at the top of the hour because we have a lot to cover. We have some great speakers joining us, and if you can, as you hop on, please put your chapter name and your Zoom name so that everyone can know where you're calling in from. So we're really excited to have you here, and thank you for making time to be with us tonight. Next slide. Awesome. Well, just wanted to also, before we jump in here, wanted to celebrate and send gratitude to all the group leaders in the region who made us really successful in our 100% participation in doing the group leader survey for 2024 for CCL. So really excited for all of you and huge gratitude for doing that. That really helps CCL kind of get a pulse on how things are going in the region. And
See if I can do this.
okay, I'm gonna just mute that. There we go. Okay, and next slide, please. Awesome. So, as some of you know, we are going to be having Marc Peterson do a presentation on the work that he's been doing, but we wanted to start out and welcome Christina from the Denver Metro chapter, who's going to talk a bit about Meetup and how they work with Meetup in the Denver Metro chapter. So, we'll pass it on to you, Christina, so you can share your screen and jump right in.
Hi, everybody. Let me just get screen share going. You don't see it right now, right?
Not yet.
Okay.
You need to be louder, Christina.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me and see my presentation?
Yes.
Hi. So my name is Christina Johnson. I'm a chapter leader with CCL Denver. And I'm going to have just a couple minutes to talk tonight, so I'm going to move quickly, but feel free to reach out after the meeting at any time, and I would be happy to tell you more about how our chapter uses meetup.com to help us grow our chapter. So very briefly, here's some information about me and my history with CCL. And let's start with some very basics of what is meetup.com. So if you've never heard of it before, Meetup is a large online platform, a website similar to like a Facebook or something where people have profiles. And people use it to join and find groups and clubs that they're interested in. So you'll see some information here on the slide, but I'll give an example of how I used Meetup in my own personal life before joining CCL to give you an idea. So I think a lot of people in my generation, the like older millennials, we had such an easy time making friends in college, and then we got out into the real world and discovered that it was much harder. And so people my age and used Meetup a lot to find community and find groups to join, especially if we had moved to a new city. So me, for example, I took a lot of foreign languages in college, so I would join meetup groups, like Spanish conversation group, get together once a month with a group of people and have a Spanish conversation, things like that. So just really quick to clarify too, this is not online dating. So online dating is really big right now, but that's for one-to-one relationships. Meetup is actually geared towards helping people find groups and clubs to join. So say like a hiking group that meets once a month at a park and you go on a walk, a group hike with like 12 or 20 people in it. It's also primarily geographically based, so you're going to be looking for in-person gatherings right there in your city. So this is an example of what our meetup page looks like. Each group can have its own little landing page where you have a picture, some basic information about the group. As you can see over here, on the right, we have almost 500 members in this group. And this group has existed since before I joined CCL 4 years ago. I'm not even sure who originally started it, but it's my job to maintain it. And this just helps us have another audience and attract members in a different way besides just the main CCL community. So, what are the benefits of using Meetup? The main thing is that you're getting in front of a large group of people that is looking for things to do in their spare time. So they want to make friends, they want to get involved, they want to go out, they want to do things. Whenever I meet someone at a CCL event and they found us through the Meetup, the most common thing they'll say when I ask, how did you hear about us? Is say, well, I moved to Denver and I just wanted to find things to do. So I went on Meetup and searched climate and found this. Something else I really like about it is that you have access to an audience that has never heard of CCL before. So oftentimes when people sign up through the CCL main website, they've been reached somehow through tabling or something brought them to CCL. But this is just a group of people that are like looking for things, and this might catch their eye. So you really have people that might not have ever heard of the organization before. So how does it work? To have a group on meetup.com, the group owners pay. So it's a 6-month fee. And then once you have a group established, you can schedule events, you can send communications to individual members who have joined your group, and you can send mass communications to everyone on your roster. And then for individuals, it's free to sign up. You create a profile and then you just search groups and join based on your interests and where you live. On the right, that's what it looks like, our list of upcoming events on our chapters page. So if you wanted to do this, some advice I would have for you is to establish your group and then have some existing active members from your chapter sign up. So it looks inviting for people who are curious to join. They don't have to feel weird about being the first person to sign up. And then you will also get a notification every time a new person signs up to join your meetup. So just consider that like another pipeline for whatever you do when new members on board. So if you have welcome team or a certain protocol, just add them to the list and do some outreach to them when they join. I typically like to include some information when I first reach out to someone on Meetup. So I'll say like, we have this group on Meetup to help us reach a wide audience, but this is not the main hub of our activity or not the main source of information on our chapter. So I'll invite them to a conversation, and then I'll also invite them to join a CCL community so that they're like receiving all the information and communications from the organization as a whole. And so what event types do well for Meetup in our chapter? So like I was mentioning, people primarily join Meetup because they're looking for socializing. They want to get out and do things. So in my chapter, at least, we have in the past tended to really lean heavily academic content, have a policy expert come on and talk about carbon fee and dividend, which is very interesting, but maybe not necessarily what people are looking for when they're trying to make friends and build community. So a couple of years ago, we started having every few months in our chapter just a casual social gathering. So we'll have a happy hour, we'll have a picnic when the weather's nice. Those activities do really well with our Meetup audience. And then also when there's a really concrete activity that we're going to do, like the EVP postcard writing, it also has been a big hit. And then when you're posting an event on Meetup, I would just encourage you to consider the language that you're going to use to attract people to come to these events. So I'm always going to talk about how this is a good way to meet people who have concerns about the climate just the way you do. It's a good way to build community in a fun and casual setting. So just think about how you market your event towards these audiences. Include a fun picture. I just go on Google Images and get something for free, but really trying to invite it for people to make it look fun and engaging. When you create an event on Meetup, it's a very straightforward flow. So if you've ever made an online event for anything, it's pretty straightforward. You're going to pick a date, a start time, an end time, a location. The one thing I would just draw your attention to is this announce feature. So when you publish an event on your Meetup, all it is going to be is showing up on your Meetup page, and you need to announce it in order to send an email blast to everyone in your roster. So say, for example, you have like 50 people in your Meetup. If you post an event, they would have to come to your Meetup page in order to check your calendar and see what the events are. But if you announce it, that sends an email blast to everyone. So it just increases the visibility of your event. So make sure you do that whenever you have an event. And then the only other thing that's slightly tricky is that you're going to want to make sure you select your tags or your topics very wisely when you're creating an event. So at the bottom of the event description, there's going to be an area where you can select basically key search terms so that when people are on Meetup and just searching different topics, your event will pop up as something that they might be interested in. So in these two examples down here, the red X is what you don't want to do, which is be really repetitive with your tags, because like in this chess example, you're only going to reach people who are searching for chess. In the green check example, you're going to get people who want to make new friends, hang out, have lunch, do chess. So for example, for CCL, what I don't do is say like, put my tags as climate change, global warming, sustainability, like those are all repetitive. So instead I'll put things like climate change, activism, community building, political causes, make new friends, things like that, so that I'm really broadening who might find my event and decide to come. So it's been very successful for us to get new members this way, but there are some challenges. So I would just point out that probably the same as when people join your roster in any format, not just through Meetup, is that you'll have a lot of people who sign up, but very fewer will actually ever come to an event, and then much smaller than that will ever like become a repeating active member. So you know, it's a numbers game, and this does just increase your numbers that you can get if you were only going through CCL. The other thing is the expense. So depending on what kind of resources your chapter has, you may or may not be able to afford the fees. And it is another thing to manage. So if you're going to make the investment in running a meetup, I would recommend that you make sure you have a dedicated person who's able to run it to make the most out of it. So that's a very brief overview. And as I said, I'm happy to connect and explain more if anyone's interested or would have any questions. So that's my personal email there. And then if you don't remember my name, just remember I'm from Denver, and you can reach me through the Denver email. I get those. So thanks, and have a good night.
Hey, thanks a lot, Christina, and I appreciate the concentration of time on this, and apologies for sort of a rush through here, but we really appreciate that feedback. And if you would also include your email in the chat, that way people can get to it directly, and please direct any questions to Christina that you may have. So now we're going to be talking about this opportunity to hear Marc present. But first of all, just wanted to make a reminder to everybody that in the chat, there's a link to log this attendance for the meeting. It's really easy to do. All you need to do is click on that link and you're automatically logged in for your attendance here. So I don't know, Laurel, do you want to share that screenshot there? Yes. So really excited to hear Marc do a presentation about his, this is something that Marc has been doing for many years, and it's the market-driven transition to clean energy. And Marc is was a retired executive, is a retired executive from General Electric, and after 30 years in the electrical generation industry, where he initially focused on fossil fuels and then renewables. His work included the cost, benefits, reliability, and challenges of those technologies. Marc is CCL's co-state coordinator and a member of the steering committee for the Salt Lake City chapter, which is now called the Wasatch Front chapter. So Marc, I'll let you take it from there. Also, just wanted everyone to know that Marc is happy to answer questions as he goes. So please use the raise hand feature in Zoom at the bottom of Zoom. Raise hands if you have questions along the way, because Marc likes to answer them as they come. Of course, we will have room at the end of the presentation also to talk about or answer other questions that people may have. So with that, Marc, quick intro, and we'll pass it off to you.
Okay, thank you, Bill. So, and I want to thank Susan Campbell for suggesting that I do this discussion actually with Colorado, and then I want to thank Laurel and Bill saying, well, if you're going to do it for Colorado, why don't we just do it for the region? And this is a condensed, more focused version of something that I do once a month, and get into a little bit more detail. So, disclaimer: this is what I think is some pretty optimistic stuff. And my disclaimer is we're already experiencing some of the effects of climate change. Those effects are only going to get worse before they get better. This optimistic stuff is great, but the faster we make changes occur, the less impact we have from additional climate changes. That's my disclaimer. So I will try and keep an eye on raised hands, and I will try and keep an eye on the chat, but in case I don't, then I think Bill's going to help me out, and maybe others can too. I think there was 25 people or so, and so that'll be probably too difficult just for people to speak up. But please make comments, or if you want to make a comment, do that. If you want to tell me I don't know what I'm talking about, that's okay too. Say that, and let's discuss it. Bill said that I would answer it. I'm going to say that I will discuss it, and we'll see whether that's an acceptable answer or not. Okay, those are my disclaimers. I'm going to start off with a little bit of a cheesy start, but we did this. I saw Karen and Mark and Bill at our last Salt Lake chapter meeting last Saturday, and I liked it a lot. And so this is a little bit of a cheesy start, but this is what I'm going to do. Imagine the possibility. Imagine the possibility of the world being powered by clean, reliable, and inexpensive electrical power. Okay, so sometimes if you talk to conservatives about power generation, they say it has to cover three things. It has to be inexpensive, it has to be reliable, and then it's okay if it's clean. So let's imagine it covers all of those things. And what I'm going to try and discuss or make the case of is our world is quickly transitioning to that possibility. Okay, so the bottom line, it's about economics. It is much less about wanting to be green than about economics. And that's why it's happening, because it is about economics. Okay, nothing in the chat, haven't upset anybody yet. All right, so I'm going to talk about two things. I'm going to talk about electric vehicles, and I'm going to talk about electrical generation. I'm talking about electric vehicles first because that leads into electrical generation, meaning EVs are driving battery technology development, and battery technology development is allowing for electrical generation to grow as fast as it is. And we're going to talk about some of those issues. Okay, EVs today have a lower 5-year total cost of ownership than gas cars. Today, this year, electric vehicles, if you look at total cost of ownership, are less expensive. And they perform better. Some folks might argue about that. I've had one, actually, my wife has one as well. I'm convinced they perform better. You have to drive it if you haven't to see that. So then I say tomorrow they will be even cheaper and even better. And, you know, maybe not tomorrow, the next day. Maybe not tomorrow, September 25th. But the technology associated with electric vehicles is moving so fast that almost every day they're becoming cheaper and better performing. Okay, renewables or clean energy. Get this out of the way. Today, produce electricity much less expensively than fossil fuels. We'll talk about that, and I'll back it up in a little bit. And along with other clean energy sources, are just as reliable. If you talk to conservatives who talk about clean energy, they say that, you know, it's intermittent, it's not reliable, all that stuff. Yeah, no, that's not happening. All right.
Mark, jumping in, we have a raised hand.
Okay. Luke.
Yeah, Mark, I want to go back to the EVs because on another tab on my browser, I have an advertised EV a few blocks from me that I'm looking to buy. So I'm very close to moving on that. but does that cost of ownership include insurance? Because I had a rude surprise that insurance on EVs is higher because of the battery. I called, my auto insurance carrier to verify this, with a couple of models that I have in mind, and it was about $100 or more, excuse me, $100 per month more premium.
So the analysis that I looked at or that I read that put this together, who was that? I probably got that in my notes, but then I'd have to shrink the screen to get that. But it was a reputable, very reputable source like JD Power or something like that. Yes, it did include insurance. And here's the thing. So it did include insurance in that analysis. I would say shop around because I don't pay any more for my insurance. There isn't a premium on that from mine. So I don't know if that's the case with a bunch of others or not, but I didn't experience that. Okay, is that good enough? Moving on then. What? Okay, so I started this out by saying why people think the way they do, and then I got all kinds of pushback saying that's way too broad and you don't know what you're talking about. And I said, okay, so with regard to energy, why people think the way they do, right? People's position on energy is developed from the information they receive. If someone's position is different than yours, it's because the information they receive is different than the information you receive. Right? Today's society is highly polarized. It's not because we're all listening to the same information and then becoming polarized. It's because we're listening to radically different information. Okay, that gives us then an opportunity to provide non-climate advocates some information that they may or have not heard before, right? This gives us an opportunity to say, have you thought of? Now, that's when we talk through what's the best way to approach someone who disagrees, and the best approach is to find something to agree with them. And yes, you have to do all of that, but it does give us an information or an opportunity to say, have you heard this? And I'm hoping part of this discussion will be, have you heard this? Okay. Market-driven, all right, so pessimists. Sound clever, optimists change the world. This is how it's been, right? So, and I've been involved in this stuff, as Bill said, a long time. So started out, and this is probably the right time frame for me. Solar and wind just don't work. Yep, heard that. Solar and wind are just too expensive. Yep, heard that. Kept going. The grid can't handle solar and wind intermittency. That started about 10 years or more ago. That's still going on. Heard that. That's not true. Grids and permitting will stop growth. Well, there is some truth to that. We need to fix permitting issues, but all the while, the technology's increased, the technology's got less expensive and has gotten better. Okay, so question, and raise your hands on this. Somebody has to raise their hand, but not everybody. What do you think the 2024 worldwide percent of electric vehicles sold will be? We're into the third quarter, almost into the fourth quarter. So it's, the trajectory is pretty solid. Nobody's gonna make a guess.
We've got 35 and 25 and 45 in the chat.
I'll say 20, Mark.
All right.
I'll lowball.
Thank you. Worldwide EV market share is on track to be 25%. US is on track to be 11%. US is kind of behind the rest of the world. China's EV market share is on track to be 45. So, those that guessed 45, it's there in China, and I've got a slide or two away that shows why that's incredibly important. Okay, but point is here, it's no longer 1 or 2%. It's growing rapidly. Even though people are saying it's not growing this year, it's growing rapidly. And this looks at overall price. This is not total 5-year price. This is average existing price. Okay, and EVs, as you see, have been continuously going down. And in some, you pick the right car, then there are many less expensive EVs that are now as competitive as combustion engine cars. So again, economics, the price is getting to where you can't see the difference. This is an average cost of ownership slide, and anything in green shows that the average cost of ownership, well, the darker the green, the bigger the advantage for EVs. Only in those red states are where actually EVs are more expensive on a 5-year total cost of ownership. Bad economics. Okay, this is my slide on why it's so important that Chinese EV production or sales, or is so important, sitting at 45%. China is rapidly moving or increasing their share of EVs. It's a tremendous growth rate. But more important, if you look at the blue line is automobiles, and then the black is commercial vehicles. But compare the number of vehicles manufactured in China to that in the US or any place else. China is dominating the world, and they're going aggressively, transitioning aggressively to EVs. So that's why you've heard talk about 100% tariff on Chinese vehicles to keep them out of the United States, to try and let our manufacturers survive. Because if China were allowed to sell their vehicles in the US at the prices that they're selling around the world, the US market is not prepared. The US manufacturers are, with the exception of Tesla, are not prepared to compete. And that's why this 100% tariff and other activities are trying to give the US manufacturers breathing space to survive, so that they can try and catch up with technology. However, it was Ford's CEO that said a week or so ago, it's going to be really tough for us, meaning Ford, to compete against Chinese manufacturers that have 3 or 4 times the volume. It's going to be tough. But even though EV penetration in the US is only 11%, they know, the manufacturers know, if they don't transition, they're out of business. Anybody want to push back on that? Nobody wants to push back. Okay. So there's been a fair amount of information in the press lately that says the EV boom is over, it's leveled out, it's not happening. That's just not the truth. There have been up and down points and quarters, and it's true that the US market sales in the fourth quarter is much higher than sales in the first quarter, and so you have these natural dips. But the overall trajectory is it's a growing market. And the point here is, if the US manufacturers don't transition to EVs, they go out of business. Just a fact. Okay, any pushback there? Okay, I'm transitioning to energy. I'm moving quite fast. All right, what do you think the worldwide percent of clean energy generated in 2023 was? I'm looking in the chat. You can stick numbers in there. 40%, 18%. David Klein, 18%. Okay, lots of bouncing around, somewhere between 18 and 40. The worldwide percent of clean energy. This is a bit of a challenging question, because it's clean energy, not just renewables. And clean energy means hydro and nuclear is included. more than Dave Klein, and I say that because Dave is retired from NREL, right? National Renewable Energy Laboratory, right? More than 40% of the world's electricity came from zero carbon sources. That's not wind and solar. That's all zero carbon sources, including hydro and nuclear. 14% came from wind and solar. So the rest of it, there's a lot from nuclear. There was a fair amount from hydro. Almost 91% of global net power capacity additions came from solar and wind. So when you talk about, okay, what's coming online now, over 90% is from clean energy, wind and solar. And then when you look in the lower right chart here, global half-yearly investments in renewable energy, look at the growth of investments in clean energy. It's just not happening in, I think I've got another chart that's going to make a more definitive statement there, but it's just not happening in fossil fuels. All the investments and all the new development is happening in renewables. And it's not because people want to be green. I wish it were, but that's not why it's happening. It's happening because, I'll get to the because. So this chart, so I talk about an S-curve, right? And an S-curve comes from business classes, that whenever there's a new technology, when that new technology exceeds 5% penetration, then it takes off on an S-curve or a steep ramp up until it gets to a very high percentage penetration, and it levels off and waits for the next technology. And so think of clean energy or renewables as just another new technology. This is just a new transition. But when you look at, so the yellow lines, the dots over here are where it was forecasted that this amount of penetration would occur. And so the actual occurrence has significantly exceeded what was forecasted. And so it's an S-curve, a new technology introduced into the market and going through that rapid ramp up. And all new technologies, if they're accepted in the marketplace, that's what happens. Okay, back to the same question. What do you think the US percent of clean energy generated was in March 2024? I picked that specific month because it was kind of high that month, but it's not far from where everything is now. And again, the tricky part of this is clean energy. Right? It's easy to get the data off the web for wind and solar and even batteries. It's not so easy to get this data off the web for clean energy. So this is just US. Anybody want to throw in give me some chat predictions, just throw in some numbers so I feel like
we've got 30, 40, 25%, 50%, 30%.
Yep. All right. So this is from the DOE, Department of Energy. What's that site? This is data that I pulled off of their website, and I had to put it in a spreadsheet and add hydro and nuclear to it so that I could get a total clean energy number. And in March 2024, 46% of our energy, electrical generation, came from clean energy. So what does that mean, right? So that means that the goal, the challenge, all we have to do is cover another 55%. We don't need to cover 90% or 80%. All we have to do is cover another 55% in clean energy. And I think I've got an investment chart that shows the same as that for the world, right? All the new investments are going into wind, solar, and batteries. Okay, cost of energy. I've got unsubsidized in red here because the next chart looks at subsidized, and these are ranges, right? Rooftop solar is kind of expensive. Nuclear is kind of expensive. Gas peaking, for those that know what that is, well, I should say, so the comment earlier that, look, wind and solar will never work because they're intermittent and you need to balance them out. There's always had to be balancing technologies in the grid. There always was. And that's because older baseload technologies, you turned them on, you let them go, and you didn't move, and they didn't go up and down, but demand goes up and down. And so you always had to have a technology that could follow demand, just like with wind and solar, they go up and down, but you need a technology that can follow those intermittencies. Well, it was gas peaking, but it's expensive, and actually it pollutes more than other gas technologies as well. Okay, solar PV. Community and industrial, still kind of expensive. Anyway, I'm not going to go through all those. Coal is expensive. Wind offshore is expensive, but you've really got to want wind offshore, have no other choices to build it, and that is the case in some places. Geothermal, which I'm pretty high on, is reasonably priced and getting less expensive. We can talk about that more if somebody wants to talk. Gas combined cycle is the least costly gas technology, but it's not as inexpensive as solar PV utility scale and wind onshore, which the black charts, the black bars are the high estimate, the blues are the low estimates, and it depends on the resource and access to grid and things like that. Okay, but again, this points out unsubsidized. Well, that's not fair to say. The renewables are unsubsidized. Fossil fuels have been heavily subsidized for 100 years or so. But anyway, lowest cost of technology, unsubsidized.
Mark, questions in the chat. What is the forecast for hydro due to water shortages and drought? And then another question after that.
You can't permit new hydro. Hydro's not going to grow. And you're absolutely right. Given water shortages and drought and climate change impacts, hydro is likely to decrease slightly over time. But you can't grow hydro. And the next one is, do we need to cover more than 55% given that electricity demand will increase? Well, yes. You're absolutely correct. Energy demand is increasing rapidly. That's not because of EVs, and that's even primarily not because people are switching to electricity for all sources of energy. It's because of artificial intelligence on the server farms. And yeah, it's going to have to grow because the market is growing rapidly. Yep.
And
okay.
same person, Ron, has his raised hand. He was the one who asked that last question.
Okay, Ron. Have to go off mute.
Sorry. I think it's important to understand in the Lazard studies that the nuclear number is based on the nuclear experience in Georgia, which I'm not sure is a clear marker of cost going forward, especially if we can get SMRs going forward, like in Kemmerer, Wyoming. And so I think that number is a bit misleading.
Fair enough.
And the other point that I wanted to make is that I don't know how you would do it, but it would be nice if they could factor in for wind and solar the cost of new transmission. Because that is going to be a part of implementing that. Here in Colorado, they're predicting upwards of over $4 billion for new transmission capability. That's not a trivial number. That's pretty expensive.
when I was in the business, we used to say when you start talking billions of dollars, that was real money. Yeah, that's real money. Let me address nuclear first. So yeah, it's based off of the old technology. The new technology doesn't exist yet, right? They don't know what the costs are yet.
That's true.
And nuclear has a 50-year history of never meeting cost targets. This might be different. It might be closer to what they predict, but as it's been developed, they've lost. So there was in Utah, there were several municipalities who were tied in and bought into some of those new smart micro nuke sites, and several, not all, have backed out because of the trend in cost that they've been showing. So who knows? It may.
Right, but I want us to be careful with that, because the plant in Idaho that its subscription cost was too high was a traditional water-cooled power plant, nuclear plant.
Oh.
And the new plant that's going into Kemmerer, Wyoming, is totally different technology. And they're telling us that it has half the cement, half the steel. And so I'm optimistic that the costs are going to come down. Will it become viable? I don't know. But I think we need to be careful making this broad brush about the past sins of nuclear costs going forward. That's today, and yesterday, and tomorrow, nuclear may have a role in our energy portfolio. And I think that's important to recognize.
Fair enough. And I'm not anti-nuclear, I'm just anti-high cost energy, right? But let me make one more point on nuclear. So nuclear is one of those baseload technologies. It's not a follower technology, right? You turn it on, you got to leave it on. The new technology that they're putting into Kemmerer offloads that. They produce more than is needed, and then they charge up salt batteries, I think it is, so that can be used as a balancing technology. But that's adding a whole battery storage cost that nobody's built into the expected outcome. And then there is, that facility is not expected to, this is the first, this demonstration facility, it's not expected to come on until sometime after 2023. I think it's maybe 2030, maybe 2035. And that's for the first demonstration unit. And then it takes a long time to permit new units and then to build new units. And so it may be that it's cost effective, and it may be a good solution, especially with this salt battery, so that it can follow demand. But it's a ways off before that's real time.
I agree.
Then let me come back to transmission. So transmission's a huge issue, and permitting's a huge issue. And permitting reform is absolutely needed in order to permit the additional transmission lines. But that's not only an issue with renewables, because of the increasing demand. That's an issue with any technology that needs to be built to fit that new demand. And then if you take fossil fuels off of the existing transmission lines, it opens up that space for other clean energies. Not saying that it's a huge issue. It's not a trivial issue, and it's big. But you can improve the throughput of those transmission lines, and if you take some of that load off now, then you can use some of it for new clean energy. But absolutely significant issues. Okay, let me go back to.
Hey, Mark, sorry, jumping in one more. With so much more electricity coming from clean energy, why is CO2 still rising on the Keeling curve?
Because we're still 55% today. We're still putting new CO2 into the atmosphere. And more CO2 will go into the atmosphere until we don't put any more up there. And that's our reason for being involved in CCL, to try and to expedite the transition, right? And stop putting CO2 into the atmosphere. Okay, let me get unsubsidized. So And this is Inflation Reduction Act subsidies, and I was heavily involved in new development and with finance folks. And here's in best case scenario, right? It goes when the resource is good, transmission access is good, then wind onshore is essentially free. And that's what new development from other technologies needs to compete with, right? And when you look at solar PV utility scale, $6 a megawatt, that's pretty close to free. Impossible for other technologies to compete with. And that's why everything going in, or nearly everything going in, is wind, solar, and batteries. Is battery on here? Batteries again, so I started to try to make that case with what's going on in electric vehicles, and that's driving it. But the capability and capability is increasing dramatically, and the cost of batteries is decreasing dramatically. And the reason I'm talking batteries rather than nuclear is you can buy them now, right? It's not, doesn't have to be invented. You can buy them now. Okay. This is U.S. additions. I got to move this stuff out of the way so I can read it.
Mark, are we supposed to be seeing your slide?
Yeah, you're not seeing my slide?
No.
I can see it.
Tracy, yeah, I can see it. Tracy, I was trying to write you in the chat. There's a down arrow at the top of the screen. Just check to be sure. If you click on it, it will ask, be sure you're clicked on Marc Peterson's screen. Otherwise, there's two choices, meeting only or that screen, and maybe you toggle over to that.
Is it working, Tracy?
Not yet, but don't let me hold you up. Keep going, Mark. I'll figure it out.
Okay. FERC says renewables were 99% of new generation capacity in June, and 91% in the first half of 2024. So this is part of you know, the current permitting reform legislation includes a piece of permitting reform for fossil fuels. And my response to that is, who cares? Nobody's going to build it, or they're not going to build much. And if that's what you got to give away in order to get renewables built, that's a great trade. They're just not being built and installed because the costs favor clean energy. Costs nationally and worldwide favor clean energy. And that can be a politically sensitive thing, so I'm not going to ask for people to push back on there. Okay, solar batteries dominate new power plants. That's where the money is going. That's where the development's going. And they're going there because that's the cheapest source, cheapest existing technology to balance wind and solar. Okay, then you look at some of these natural gas, petroleum liquids, other natural gas. They're just not being, they're not being installed. They're not being built because they cost too much. Okay, but, and this may be too technical for what I wanted to get into in this discussion. But wind and solar are intermittent. If you look at one solar array and you look at one wind turbine, they are highly intermittent. If you spread solar and wind across the grid and geographically disperse them, the climate conditions in one area is radically different than the weather conditions in another area. Like the weather conditions in San Diego can be radically different than the weather conditions in Butte, Montana. And the current grid, you can trade energy from both of those places. It's cumbersome right now, and that needs to be fixed. but you can send energy from either place. Okay, so this is looking at California. Yellow is solar and green is wind. Here's the thing, wind and solar are highly complementary. If you have 50% of each, then they help each other out. But if you build too much solar, and that's what California did, then you have much bigger gaps that you've got to fill in the morning and in the afternoon. And these gaps on the side are what you have to have a technology that can cover that gap. Okay, it would have been much less if they would have 50%. But that's how it turned out. So yeah, I'm not saying that there's not big issues. There are issues. You do have to have technologies to cover those gaps. Man, that's the way it is. Okay. This is worldwide. Where does it say? This is worldwide. Okay. So there's been a lot of discussion about, okay, yeah, fine, but the rest of the world and the third world countries who are trying to get electricity to their populations are going to use coal because coal is less expensive. That's a fine argument. It's just not what's happening, right? It's all green. It's clean energy. There is some coal, and this includes India, China, every place in the world, right? And especially China is installing more clean energy than the rest of the world combined. It's just not happening. When people say that the US shouldn't do anything because the rest of the world is the problem, the rest of the world is moving faster than we are. The rest of the world is moving faster than we are. Okay, which gets me to, this is, boy, I've got to get some 2024 numbers here, right? So if you look at 2010, this is US, this is what was installed, and it was a lot of coal and gas. And in the queue to be built was some wind, solar, and gas. In 2022, this is what was installed. Some coal, bunch gas. This is what was in the queue to be built. And this fits in with the other charts that showed, you know, what's being built and what's being invested. It's a little bit of gas. Everything else is clean. That's where the money's going. And this is why we need to get permitting reform to get this stuff built. But also what's really interesting about this is, so this is the installed amount. There is more in the queue, more clean energy in the queue to be built than all of the existing technologies, all of the existing generation. And has, what is that, about a 30% upside for growth? All we need to do is get permitting reform and get this stuff built. And this isn't, you know, these aren't pipe dreams. This is stuff where the site's been identified, the access to transmission has been identified, although not secured, and the permits have been submitted, although not granted. All we need to do is get this stuff built, and that covers all, you know, a third more. It probably covers everything we need, including growth. Anybody want to push back on that? Okay, I'm going to move on. Abundant wind resources. The darker I used to say the darker the better. That's not true. As long as it's not orange, all you need to do is match the wind turbine technology with the local resource. Meaning the darker has greater resource, but if you put a big blade on that turbine to catch low wind, you rip the turbine apart and the blades go flying, right? And in the lighter blue areas, you just put a taller tower and a blade that captures more wind. Okay, so any blue is good wind resource. Orange, not good wind, not good resource. This is solar. Darker is better. Lots of good solar, not so much in the Pacific Northwest. And, you know, it's not terrible in Maine, but it's not as good as it is in Florida. but good solar resource. This is geothermal. So how many minutes have I got? I got 5 minutes. Here's the thing on geothermal. The newer sites, and Fervo Energy in they've got a site in Utah and in California. They've switched to using the horizontal drilling technology that was developed for fracking. Not saying that they do fracking. Fracking's got lots of negative connotations. That it's a closed loop, nothing escapes. They don't put chemicals into the ground, and it's a closed loop system. But they do use this vertical shaft and then a bunch of horizontal shafts, and so it allows them access to a greater amount of energy, and so it significantly increases the geography of where you can put sites and have them financially viable. Okay, so any red or even this lighter orange are probably viable geothermal sites. And this is, Fervo is one of the first. They're putting in a 400 megawatt system right now, and then they'll grow from there. This is where I think once the major fossil fuel companies figure out that their market's going away, they've got expertise in this area. If I were them, I would be investing heavily in this technology because they're not going to survive with the other technologies, fossil fuels. And with geothermal, you can turn it up and turn it down, and you can use it to follow wind and solar. Right? It's an immediate turn up and turn down. Well, it can't go up farther than the peak design capacity, but then neither can anything else. Okay. I already talked about Fervo, and I think I'm getting to, here's my last one. Imagine the possibility. This is not going to occur overnight. And this is, the full transition is going to take 20 or 30 years. And in 20 or 30 years, just as Bill brought up before, somebody said, what about all the CO2s that's still going into the atmosphere? We're going to put a lot more CO2 in the atmosphere before all of our energy comes from clean sources. And so everything that we can do to expedite that transition, and really everything that we can do to expedite the permitting of those facilities that are already identified, is going to shorten the amount of CO2 that goes into the atmosphere. I've got 2 minutes left for questions or pushback. Hey, I would feel much better if somebody told me I was, I really appreciated Don telling me that I didn't capture the whole thing and push back. Anybody else? Okay, well, thank you. I'm incredibly interested in this area. I still follow it. I still keep close to it, and it's changing rapidly. And that's my story.
Well, Mark, that was fantastic, and I'm getting feedback in the chat for you, and we will be sharing the recording from this on the notes from the meeting. And Mark, also, are you okay sharing the slide deck for people?
Yep. Shall I send the link to you?
Yeah, send it to me, and if you want, you could throw it in the chat too, and people could pick it up right now, or we will include it in the notes as well.
Okay. Hey, let me also offer, so this was a condensed version, and I tried to be very focused. If anyone wants a deeper dive discussion, I'm happy to do it for, as long as there's one person in attendance, then I'm happy to talk.
Yeah, and what we'll do is, so the meeting ends officially at 8 o'clock, and we do have some action items that we will share in the notes to invite people to participate for monthly actions. And we'll, if anyone wants to stay on and ask questions of Mark, or Mark, are you okay sitting in for a little and answering?
Yeah.
And certainly people are welcome to stay on. and ask those questions. And you know, again, really appreciate the time you put into this, Mark, and sharing such a positive message.
I have fun with it. Thanks.